Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro Classic Physique athlete. Today's guest is Scott Dennis. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I'm excited to chop it up with you. Scott, the first question that I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Just got to go back to the OGs that really were the first bodybuilders that I knew when I got into bodybuilding. And that's Jay and Ronnie. All-time favorites, easily. I know those guys were like 1 and 2 and always battling each other. So most people probably liked one or the other, but they were both my favorite, those two together, 100%.
Very cool, man. Love it. You can't go wrong with that combo. So tell us, Scott, at what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
Yeah, I had my first gym membership when I was 15. I don't remember what got me really like to the urge of finally doing it, but I did. I was playing football back then. Obviously, I was only 15 and I was very, very tiny. I remember looking at football players and being like, wow, those guys are like so jacked. I'm like, I wanted to be like that. So I got a gym membership. I had my mom drop me off at the gym every day. And then that's where I picked up my first bodybuilding magazine. And that's when I went from like football to like bodybuilding being like superheroes to me, you know?
For sure. Do you remember what magazine or who was on the cover of that first magazine that you picked up at the gym?
No, I wish I did. I have a lot of old magazines, but those were like later in my life. That was when I was probably in my teens, and you see like a lot of like Jay and Ronnie, and then later years like Phil in the beginning of his years. But yeah, no, I just remember looking at like usually like ads and then, you know, training programs, these magazines, and seeing these guys and just being like so blown away by what they looked like. I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world. And 15-year-old little, like, I must have been like maybe 120 pounds, just thinking that that's amazing.
Very cool, man. Love that. All right. So I kind of like to use that last question, Scott, just to kind of transition into my guest backstory. So you kind of mentioned football. Talk about where you grew up, talk about those younger years, talk about sports that you played, maybe some of those influences in your life, whether they were your parents or a coach or a teacher. Just paint the picture for your childhood a little bit up to about high school, and then we'll transition from there.
Yeah, so like I said, I played football, but baseball was actually my main sport. Football was kind of what got me into lifting. I played baseball and football throughout high school. I was a first team All-State, both football and baseball. Played at a very high level. I played, you know, the Vermont, New Hampshire Shrine All-Star game in football. So I excelled very highly in both those sports. I was a little undersized for football, but I had a lot of heart. And honestly, training, when I got into training, like I was one of the very few people that worked out, you know, when I was 15, 16, 17 years old for football. So even though I was a lot smaller than everybody else, that gave me like a big upper hand playing those sports. But yeah, so baseball and football, and then I went on to play college baseball. I went to a Division III school up north in New York. So I actually did a medical red shirt there that year. I tore my rotator cuff, my labrum. I played the fall season there, playing baseball, and I excelled very, very well. My dream was to always play Division I baseball. I wasn't getting a lot of looks in high school because I had a lot of shoulder injuries. I wasn't actually able to play in the field, so I was a designated hitter. My senior year in high school, I hit 8 home runs in 16 games. So I was a power hitter. I was still like very small back then. I was probably 135 pounds. I remember going to college, I was 140 pounds. But like I said, the weightlifting really helped me out with that. I transferred to the University of Vermont. I played the fall league baseball with them. And then I ended up getting cut because my shoulder just wasn't, it didn't come back, and I wasn't able to play in the field. So they weren't going to leave me a spot to play on the team without being able to play in the field. So that was my end of my baseball career was my sophomore year. So I actually ended up playing for a semi-pro football team in the area in college, just because we didn't have a football team there. And I wanted to still play sports. So I did that till I was 26 through college. And then while I was still in Boston actually as well. So I played football till I was 26 years old, right before I started bodybuilding, actually.
Very cool. So, did your parents play sports, or did they kind of push you into sports? How did you kind of get the athletic background, Scott?
My parents didn't play sports themselves. My dad was very, very into sports, big football, baseball guy. He, he, he honestly, he's probably what made me who I am today when it comes to bodybuilding, because I remember being in like third grade, like baseball was, we'd be out, he'd be like recording me, taking ground balls. He'd be like drilling them at me, like for hours. And that was like all through high school. So he was very serious about baseball. It was tough being a kid and, you know, having a father so hard on you with sports. But I look back today and, I do appreciate that more, because I think that gave me the work ethic that I have today in bodybuilding. So, I mean, it worked out.
For sure. Yeah. Now, you mentioned Vermont, you mentioned Boston. Did you grow up in Vermont then? And then was it kind
Yeah.
of a smaller town? Talk to us a little bit about life in Vermont, because I'm not very familiar with it, except for maybe some syrup or something like that comes out of
Yeah,
there.
famous for syrup. I grew up in a small town, Milton, Vermont. Very small town near Canada, about 45 minutes from the border. Cold. So I lived there till I went away for a little while to go to college and came back to Vermont to finish out college. Once I graduated from college, I moved to Boston. So I was there for 10 years, and now I'm here today in Tampa, sunny Florida.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, we're gonna get into the Florida talk. So, before we kind of touch on a little bit more in terms of college, I just kind of want to wrap up the childhood a little bit. Outside of your dad, was there a teacher? Was there a coach? Was there another adult influence that really had like a huge, profound impact on your life in those younger years, Scott?
Um, I wouldn't say anybody individual, but I think a lot of coaches that I had throughout the years saw the ability that I had at a young age. They also saw how hard my dad was pushing me. And they got very involved as well. But that was pretty much each coach throughout the years. So there wasn't like one specific person, in my early childhood, other than my dad, that kind of like pushed me through that. But I did have a lot of really good influences throughout.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So you go off to college after your sophomore year, you're done playing baseball. What did you end up studying in college? And then did you graduate from college? What were you kind of thinking? I know sports was kind of like your mindset, but you probably were thinking at some point like sports is going to be over. So what were you wanting to do, with your life in terms of a career? What did you study in college? Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So, I mean, originally I always thought that I would play professional baseball. I mean, not necessarily at like a high level. Like if you don't know baseball, there's a lot of, there's single A, double A, triple A. I thought that I would at least go on and play single A for a few years, get a little professional baseball in me. So I was never really thinking too much about, what I wanted to do outside of that. But once that was over, I started studying accounting in college. So I actually graduated with my bachelor's in accounting, which is very boring. But I just remember seeing a sign at the business school that starting salaries for accountants was like $70,000, and I was like, that sounds good. I'm like, I'm good with numbers. So I ended up studying accounting, and like I said, I graduated with my bachelor's in accounting. I was originally going to go on and get my CPA. I moved to Boston. I got a job in the financial industry, working on 401k plans, which is actually what I still do to this day. I've been there 10 plus years. So I started doing that, and then once I found bodybuilding, I decided the CPA wasn't going to happen. I would rather focus on bodybuilding, which has been good and bad for my career, but it's also been great for my life outside of my career, which is it's been good. Like I said, I've been working for the same company for the past 10 years, which has allowed me to have a career in bodybuilding that I don't rely on the supplement companies and that to survive and to thrive in life. So it's been able to really let me focus on my bodybuilding career without having, the burden of not making money,
Yeah, no, that's very smart. Now, I want to ask you, Scott, before we kind of get into all the bodybuilding talk, do you kind of like having that balance, or kind of maybe that outlet with you have your career where you make your living and pay your bills, and then you kind of have, your passion or this really intense hobby of bodybuilding, being a professional bodybuilder? Do you think that for you personally, do you think that's like a healthy balance? And do you kind of like having that career and not having to solely rely on bodybuilding to pay the bills? Talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, if I had to have a choice, obviously I would love to just be a full-time bodybuilder. But if I was making a significant amount of money where thinking about my future, but I think it's best that I have this balance. Sometimes I wish it was a little bit easier, because when you're working, like I work 50-hour weeks, I'm in prep, I'm in the gym twice a day, doing cardio twice a day, training. Sometimes I wish I had it easier, where I know guys go to the gym, they come home, they eat, they nap all day, but a part of me also, a big part of me also wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, this is just the best for my life and my future. I think, not to talk shit, but I think a lot of guys in the industry today, they want to portray that they have this amazing life, being a full-time bodybuilder, when in reality, they really don't. And, they're going to struggle when bodybuilding is over, when they're 40 years old, where when I'm 40 years old and I'm done bodybuilding, or maybe a little bit later, we'll see what age that might be. I'm going to be in a really good position for, my future to not work till I'm much older than that, honestly, because we also, we've been able to invest in real estate. I do Airbnbs as well. So we've got a lot of things going on that are all because of my regular job that I wouldn't have right now if it wasn't for bodybuilding.
Yeah. Super smart, man. Kudos to you. Cause, obviously I've had a lot of conversations with bodybuilders, and, sometimes you can just kind of tell that, they're not satisfied. Like, especially with like the social media thing, like, we it's the highlight reel. You know what I mean? We see we see the trophies, we see the muscles, we see all the whatever. And a lot of that is half truth, right? It's just, it's just a game. It's a facade. And that's why I love having this podcast, is because we kind of get to go behind the muscle. We get to go behind the curtain in terms of being professional athletes. So I think that's great, man. I think that's some wise words just for anybody listening, because bodybuilding, just like football, basketball, baseball, any other sport, like these, professional basketball players and football players, like their careers at some point end. And how many times do we see these guys that signed $50 million guaranteed contracts? They're going bankrupt. And it's just like, man, like, it's all temporal, man. So I love that you are having that foundation of, the financial side of things, and you have that career. So let's get into the fun talk, which is bodybuilding. So you mentioned that you kind of picked up a magazine when you were 15 at your first gym. Talk about when football was over at 26. How did you kind of transition into bodybuilding? Because I'm assuming you were probably lifting weights kind of throughout your 20s as an athlete, but we know training as an athlete is a lot different than a bodybuilder. So talk about that transition for us, Scott.
Yeah. Like I said, so I've known, like, I've been watching bodybuilding forever. I was actually going to do a show in college, but I realized that my life was not at the time meant to do a bodybuilding show. I used to watch like all the MD, A Day in the Life, and I was like, yeah, I can't do that right now. I knew what it took, So once I stopped playing football, I actually had this random friend of mine. He was like, hey, let's do this bodybuilding competition. And I thought I was actually doing bodybuilding. I didn't even know men's physique existed at the time. And I was like, all right, let me think about it. And I was like, because I knew what it was going to take, and my life was a little bit different. I like to go out on the weekends and stuff. And I knew that was going to be out the door. So a few days later, I'm like, all right, I'm in, let's do it. And like I said, I thought I was doing bodybuilding. And then he sends me this picture of these guys in board shorts. And at first I was like, this was like early men's physique. Like this was 2013. And I was kind of looking at it, and the guys had like, the flower shorts on, and the hands on the hips. And I was like, I don't know. But I was like, I do want to see what my body is capable of. So I was like, you know what, let's just do it. You know, it'll give me an excuse to just like really see what this bodybuilding life is about. So that's where it all started. A buddy of mine talked me into it. I found out men's physique was a thing. And this was, I did my first show in 2014, like a year after I stopped playing football. And I needed that like competitiveness, you know, because like it was always fun to go to the gym and like look good, but I was missing something, you know. It's one thing to go to the gym and just have something where you're working towards, which makes training that much more fun to me. So bodybuilding was it, and that was it. I just turned 27 when I did pretty much the day that I started prep for my first show in 2014.
So talk to me then. I know you were kind of following bodybuilding, you know, throughout your 20s. In terms of like the training, was that something that you just kind of picked up from the magazines from YouTube, or did you kind of have somebody in your corner right away to kind of teach you the bodybuilding type training, or did you kind of just lift like an athlete right away?
I always lived like an athlete. I started powerlifting when I was like in my teens because the trainer at my first gym there, he knew nothing but powerlifting. So we were like these 17-year-old kids powerlifting. We had no idea what we were doing. But then, you know, I started watching the bodybuilding videos and I knew what it was, but I was also training for football. So I was doing like, you know, more athletic training. Once I decided to do the show, I knew I had some awareness of what bodybuilding training was compared to, you know, the football style athletic training, just from all the videos and magazines and stuff. So I kind of just changed that. Granted, back then, I didn't know nearly as much as I know now when it comes to training and stuff, but I knew, you know, the basics of a bodybuilding workout. So that's what I did. I didn't really have anybody at the time with the training stuff, but I actually started doing my own coaching for the first few weeks before I met up with my first coach, who actually coached me the rest of my way into my first show.
Very cool. Very cool. So why don't you talk about your first coach, and then how did you kind of connect with him?
Yeah, so a lot of people probably know him, Andrew Barry. Andrew was actually just first getting started in coaching when I started working with him. I had a friend who was actually my roommate who was also from Vermont, where Barry's from, that did some personal training with him. And he just gave me his contact. He said he does some bodybuilding coaching. I reached out to Andrew. He gave me some coaching options. And then I decided, like I said, I was very aware of what bodybuilding was, where I think a lot of people, even today, with all the things on Instagram and YouTube, are very unaware of what it really takes. But I knew, and I knew hiring a coach was the best thing for me, because I didn't even know what a macronutrient was until, you know, I started doing this and started doing some research on my own and coaching myself. But I was like, I'm going to be way better off if I hire a coach. And the cool thing is, like you said, you know, Andrew, and he was just kind of getting started back in 2014. So I've also got to see the evolution of him as a person, a bodybuilder, and a coach, you know, so it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And he turned pro, was it 2021 that he got his IFBB pro card?
Yep. Last year at was it North Americans, maybe?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely last year. Yep, definitely last year though.
Yeah,
yep.
Cool. Yeah, and he's for those of you that are listening to the podcast right now or watching on YouTube, he's also Nate Spears' coach, and we've had Nate on the podcast several times, and he's spoken very high of Andrew. Andrew's been a guest on the podcast, so if you want to learn more about Andrew, just go back into the YouTubes, and you can find Andrew's episode. So that's pretty awesome that you had somebody like Andrew in your corner, Scott, you know, from the get-go. So why don't you talk about that first show? You know, you're competing in men's physique, kind of getting your feet wet. I mean, sometimes people love, you know, like bodybuilding and competing their first show. Sometimes they hate it. What did you kind of take away from your first competition?
My first competition was when I realized that I was absolutely hooked on bodybuilding, and I only had that one show planned. And like, I remember sitting there on show day and thinking to myself, like, I want to keep doing this. I don't want to just stop. I want to do another show. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I mean, was my first prep. So it was for the first time I felt how terrible you feel throughout a prep, dieting and being that lean. But I was just like, I was so hooked, and I actually remember going into my first show. Barry was actually trying to convince me to do bodybuilding. He was like, and granted, I had like nice round muscle for like 160-pound kid, but Andrew's a bodybuilder. So he's like, we should do bodybuilding. I was like, no, I'm just going to do men's physique, But at the time, I also didn't know if I was going to be too big for men's physique. So I was like, I might not even do well at this. So, so I was like praying that I did well so that I could keep continuing on with the sport, because if I didn't do well, if I had been too big for it, I don't know what I would have done if I would have continued on and done bodybuilding. I was excited. I might have been too big for men's physique. I didn't know at the time, but I was not very big at all, so I didn't think bodybuilding was really a realistic thing for me. But yeah, I was hooked.
For sure. Very cool, man. So, let's talk about then, because from your Instagram, I saw that you turned pro in 2016. Is that correct?
2016 was my first year as a pro. It was my rookie season.
Perfect. All right. So, I mean, pretty quick. So why don't you talk about, you competed your first show, 2014. Just talk about kind of that competition history. What shows did you do? And then talk about, turning pro. And, again, that was pretty quick. So, where was your mind at when you turned pro that quickly?
Yeah. So 2014, my first show, I won that first show. And then I decided to go to nationals 5 weeks later. Which, did I have business at nationals at that point? Probably not, but I didn't, know any better. I still placed 8th. And then I took the year off, and then I focused on just coming back to nationals the next year. So 1 year later, I went to junior nationals, and I won my class there, and then turned pro. So a year of competing. And I mean, granted, it's men's physique, it's not bodybuilding. It's different, but it was still a big accomplishment for me. And then, so 2015 was my last amateur year. And then 2016 was my first year as a pro.
So, did Andrew, having him in your corner, did he kind of, give you some like really big encouragement in terms of like maybe your structure or some of your strengths in terms of an athlete? And if so, what were those? And did he kind of encourage you like, hey, Scott, you've really got some potential? I mean, was he a big plus in your corner?
He was. After that first year, he was like, all right, we should take a year off. We'll come back to nationals. We'll focus on nationals, and then we'll go from there. But I actually left Barry after my first season. Once I got in my off season, I was so new to this world. It was a totally different world to me. And I didn't know anything. And I had a lot of people in my ear telling me that to win at nationals, you have to be a part of a team. It's all politics. You got to be a part of a team or have somebody that knows somebody. So I was like, I was thinking about that, and I was like, is this, I have so many people were telling me this. And now I look back on them like they're all a bunch of idiots that don't know anything, but I was an idiot that didn't know anything either. So I listened to them. So I ended up working with another coach for that junior nationals where I won there. Barry was actually there competing with me as well. And he's been like such a good friend throughout, even after I left after that first year for the stupidest reason, but he was there supporting me. And I was so grateful for, what he had done for me that first year, because he's the one that really set up, like, even till this day, like I look back at that, like having a coach that early that set the tone for like how you should be as an athlete. It's always been with me since day one because of him. And I'm so grateful for him, even though I didn't turn pro with him. He gave me like this visual of what it takes to be an athlete, a bodybuilder. And it's always stuck with me to this day.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit more, Scott, because this is something I bring up to the guests quite a bit, the IFBB pros and even the top amateurs. But this coaching world that we're living in through social media, it's really crazy, man. So talk about maybe to some of the younger listeners that are maybe thinking about competing for the first time or thinking about hiring a coach, all of that stuff. Like what are some words of wisdom? What's some advice that you can give to somebody that has never hired a coach, or maybe they're thinking about switching coaches? Like what can you say? Because I really want people to understand, like, it's coaching is important. I think it's important to have a coach, but you know, it's not everything. And there's a lot of people that just want your money. So talk about that, please.
Yeah. There's especially young kids that don't know anything. A lot of these guys are going to go towards that like big, well-known coach that is coaching all these top Olympians. And then they're going to sign up with them and they're going to get no attention at all, you know, but they want to be with that big name person. I mean, I think it's important to have a coach. Obviously, number one, I tell people all the time, find a good coach. You know, I know some people like to learn on their own, but I think it's better to learn from a coach. And then when you get later in your career, if you want to do it on your own, because you've learned enough, but you got to start with the coach. And unfortunately, there's so many coaches out there, and it can be hard to find a good coach. But I think a lot of guys get hung up on the big name coaches who coach the most genetically gifted guys, you know, but then when you go to them, you're kind of just an amateur. Don't be afraid to find the coach that has, you know, doesn't have the big name client. Like, I mean, Barry is getting very, very like well known now, but he wasn't always that way. And for me, like the reason why I went back to him, and I was working with a pretty well known men's physique coach at the time, and yeah, I just knew that if I wanted to tap into my full potential, that I needed to be with somebody that has the knowledge and coaching ability that he had. So it was kind of like, it was a no-brainer for me in 2019 to go back to him, which and in hindsight, I look back and I regret ever leaving him, because I think about the things that I could have accomplished. And those were like kind of like my prime men's physique years, where I wasn't too big, or I think I had like the perfect men's physique look that I mean, I still did really well, but I think I still could have done a lot better and wasted, you know, some of my best years. But like I said, in loyalty, I see a lot of guys that get caught up in loyalty, and I think loyalty is great, but when it comes to coaching, I think people get too caught up in that. Like, if you're with a coach and you think that you need to be loyal to him, and it's not the best coach for you, people don't realize, like, you guys can still be, like, if that person is truly loyal to you, like, you guys should be loyal to the athlete as well. Like, if they really care about you as like a friend, there's no reason why you can't go, you know, to another coach, and you guys can still have a relationship and be friends, because not everybody just meshes together. Sometimes it's good to go out and, you know, learn new things from other coaches. But I see that nowadays with some very, very top pros that I think could be much better have they not been so into like their loyalty to their coach and kind of, you know, work with somebody that's more knowledgeable. I think people get caught up in that a lot too. But yeah, man, just don't get caught up in the big name coaches. They're not always the best for you, but also be careful, because there's a lot of bad coaches out there too. So you look at track records, you know.
Yeah, that's wise words, and I appreciate you touched on that, Scott. So how has your we talked about training kind of like when you first started training bodybuilding wise for your first competition, but how has your training kind of evolved over the years, and like what is kind of like a normal typical training split, and how does your training kind of look current day?
Well, now, unfortunately, because of the way that I used to train, my biggest focus is my legs. So I moved up to Classic in 2020, which we haven't gone into the story, but that was the year of COVID, and I was planning on doing men's physique that year, and all my shows were getting canceled, and I knew that was probably going to be my last year in men's physique, but I wanted to go out, you know, go to the Olympia, hopefully place top 10, and then call it a career for men's physique. But everything was getting canceled, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna just dive into it and do it. But looking back at training, when I first, you know, was bodybuilding, I wasn't training my legs. Like, I would train them, but not the way that I should have been, you know, but never thinking that I was going to be, because there wasn't a Classic Physique, you know. So if I could go back and tell my younger self to change something, I would teach them how to train legs properly. So now that's my big focus now. Like, I'll hit legs twice a week. So Wednesday I'll do a hamstring focused leg day. Sunday, I'll do a quad focused leg day. And I'm actually trying to simmer my upper body down a little bit, so my legs can catch up a little bit. So I'm training my back twice a week still, because I think people aren't going to get like a back that's so big that just looks disproportional to the rest of their body. So I think you can never have, too big of a back. So I do train back twice a week as well. Monday, I'll train back. Friday, I'll train back. Chest and shoulders. That's the one thing, especially shoulders. I'm trying to just tame down a little bit and let everything else catch up in my chest. So people need to realize that, like, how important your split is. When you're trying to bring up a body part, you need to focus on that body part, where people don't realize that it is hard to you can't just focus on all your body parts. If you want to bring something up, you kind of have to pick and choose, and then be very analytical on how you space your training out, and your split and your frequency and your volume, and all that is really important. But so like my chest and my shoulder volume right now is very low, because it's overpowering a little bit. So I kind of wanted to slow it down, let my legs catch up. So that's what we're doing now.
So in terms of training your back twice a week, do you have kind of like a width day where you're more focused on like your lats? And then do you have like a thickness day? What does that look like? Because I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I have done that in the past, where I've had like a day where I'm focusing on lats, and then another day where I'm focusing on, thickness, the mid back. But right now I'm kind of just half and half. So like half my workout will be, rows and pull downs, and so half will be rows, half will be pull downs. So where I'm focusing on both at the same time, where I'm not just focusing on one thing at a time, kind of hitting the pieces that I want to hit on both days. Also adding in your rack pulls on one of those days, or deadlifts, which I'm trying to go from rack pulls to deadlifts right now. I know deadlifts aren't a better back exercise, but me personally, being a bodybuilder, there's something about the difficulty of deadlifts that I enjoy. And it kind of goes back to that old school bodybuilding, where people are deadlifting, where maybe it's not the best back exercise for you, but it's something that I enjoy doing, the challenge of it. So I do things for that reason. I think guys do get caught up a lot in doing exercises that aren't the best for them. Like, I think the T-bar row is a good example of that, guys, because Ronnie Coleman did it. Like, I won't touch a T-bar row. I think it's uncomfortable. I like an isolated T-bar row with like the pad on your chest, but like a free barbell T-bar row. I think a lot of guys like to do that because Ronnie Coleman did it, and it's probably not the best exercise for them. And I see a lot of them doing it and doing way too much weight, too. Another thing that I've learned throughout the years is learning to train heavy with good form. That's probably the biggest thing I've taken away in the past 3 years, which I see a lot of young kids that I try to preach on too, is learning to train heavy relative to what you can do with, keeping a good form and, slow negatives, which I think that is kind of is lost with a lot of people nowadays too. And I saw my back really get better once I learned to do that.
Very cool. Now, I want to touch on leg training, and then we're going to kind of get back into your competition history a little bit more, Scott. But so have you found some specific exercises that have kind of helped you bring up your lower body, or where are you at in terms of that progress with your legs?
Honestly, I haven't been. Granted, I actually just the other day I was kind of getting a little frustrated with my leg growth, and then I looked at a picture from about 8 months ago till last week, and I was like, okay, they've definitely grown. When you look at yourself every day, especially you look at a body part that's your weak body part. Sometimes it gets a little frustrating, but I'm really big on like the low volume, high intensity Dorian Yates style training, progressive overload. Big on that. It's worked very well for my upper body. I'm starting to we decided actually a few weeks ago to kind of change things up a little bit, because I think that my lower body is not reacting as well as my upper body does with that style of training. So we've kind of started to throw in extra volume, higher reps. I'm a big like 6 to 10 rep guy. Now I'm trying to get into like 10 to 20, 12 to 20, 15 to 20. Cause like I'll do heavy squats. Like I can squat like 450 for like 7, 8 reps. But when I'm done, my knees hurt, you know, it's like my whole body is kind of like, just like, wow, that was really heavy and it hurt. But my legs don't feel like they're like spent, you know. But if I go do a set of like 15, the amount of blood that gets in there, it's like it's shot, you know, you can't walk. So we're starting to get into more like higher rep stuff and really try to like make the legs feel that way instead of, but I'm still doing like, I'll do one heavy set. I still think it's important to get that load in as long as you're healthy and you're able to do it. So I'll do like one set heavy, and then I'll go into like some back off sets where I'm getting into like the 15 to 20 rep range, which is really difficult for me, which has been a transition, but I think it's been really good.
Now, are you focusing mostly on like the compound leg movements, like the hack squats, barbell squats, leg press, or what's your setup for actual like quad training later today? Today's Sunday, so
Yeah.
what's your workout later today going to look like?
I'm big on the simple compound lifts. I've always been that way. Whether it's upper body, lower body, I'm big on the simple compound stuff. So what I'll do today is I'll go in and I always do like on my quad day, I'll do one hamstring exercise, and on my hamstring day, I'll do a hack squat, which is not hamstring focused, but I like to hit one like compound lift still. So I'll do that. So today, Sunday, quad focus, I'll go in and I'll do some hamstring curls. Then I'll do barbell squats. Actually, I do safety bar squats. I don't do barbell squats. I think safety bar squats, for me, I can't get my shoulders back to even do a barbell squat. Safety squats, I think, are just a better overall exercise, better than a squat, just because where the weight is, the comfort of it. So I'll do heavy safety bar squats, and then I'll get into the higher rep stuff like I mentioned, and then I'll go do some adductors, take a little break give the legs a little break, you know, do some adductors, and then I'll go do the leg press, and there I'll do the same thing. I'll get into a heavy set, and then I'll do drop sets where I'm getting into like 15, 20 reps and really just get a lot of blood flow in there. And then I'll do walking lunges, and then I'll probably finish with some higher rep, like 20 rep leg extensions. That's what my quad day has been looking like the last month or so.
Sounds like fun, dude.
Yeah, it's a lot of Sunday fun day, man.
That's right, man. That's right. Okay. So one more question here in terms of the training stuff. And then, like I said, we'll get back into your story, your contest history. But so like when you do like the leg days twice a week, you're training back twice a week. I mean, that's really taxing for your overall body. Do you usually have like higher calorie days, or do you have like refeed days on those training days, or do you kind of keep your nutrition pretty even keeled no matter what body part you're training?
Yeah, I like to do I'll do a few free meals a week. I like to have them around my leg days. So I do my big leg day Sunday. So Saturday night, I sort of mentally get ready to kill myself the next day, and then I'll have a free meal. My free meals are usually pretty clean. Like I'll do like sushi or like Greek food or Mediterranean food. But just get some calories in. And then Sunday post legs, I like Five Guys, you know, get a couple burgers and fries, you know, get those calories in. So I like to do before and after my leg days.
Perfect. Love it. All right. So let's take a step back, Scott. So you had your pro debut in men's physique in 2016. Talk about just your men's physique career. Talk about the highlights, talk about some things that you learned. And then I want you to kind of share with us why you kind of chose to transition into classic physique.
Yeah. So 2016 was my rookie year. I did the Pittsburgh Pro as my pro debut. I placed 7th, and I almost shut it down for the year because I was so upset that I placed 7th. I was like, I need to get bigger. And then I talked myself, like, all right, I'll do the New York Pro 2 weeks later. New York Pro was an even better lineup. There was probably like 10 Olympians, and it's the New York Pro. And I ended up placing 5th. It was my rookie season, first call out, 5th place, top 5 at the New York Pro. Was like, that was when I was like, all right, I'm meant to be here. You know, that was still probably my biggest bodybuilding accomplishment, was placing top 5, even being at the Olympia, even better than being at the Olympia. So I would continue on. I would go and I would place second about 6 weeks later at the Baltimore Pro to Andre Ferguson, which I don't know if you follow Men's Physique, but Andre's like, that was the year Andre became like the big name, and I pushed him very hard. A lot of people thought I could have won, but that was still a win for me, you know, getting that second place to him and kind of being compared to him. So my points were rising for the Olympia. I'd go on and get another top 5 a few weeks later. And I was 4 shows in. I was 1 point away from qualifying for the Olympia in points, with 1 show left. And my coach told me, he's like, let's just call it a season and focus on next year, which was the absolute biggest mistake of my career till this day. I absolutely should have gone. There was no doubt I would have placed top 5 that year. I think I would have been very, very high up there at the Olympia. I had guys that I beat, a guy that I beat that placed 3rd at the Olympia that year, a lot of top 10 guys. And that was just, it could have like, the way but when you in Men's Physique, it's like when you become a name at the Olympia, it kind of carries with you, you know, going forward at the shows and stuff. So that was a big mistake for me, you know, business wise too. So I called it a season that year. My second year, I did Pittsburgh again. I got like 6th. I was not in very good. I didn't look very good. Went to New York Pro. I got like 3rd call out. So I went from like my rookie season doing amazing, thinking that my second year I'm going to come in and just annihilate everybody. And I just, you know, I had a weird thing going on with my coach, and I didn't look good. And then I ended up leaving him and going to a different coach. And then I ended up getting 2nd at Puerto Rico. And then I won my next show and qualified for the Olympia. So I went to the Olympia that year. I didn't do very well at the Olympia. I looked terrible at the Olympia. This is another thing about coaches. I've learned a lot from Barry, but I've also learned a lot from the coaches that I had that weren't good. So you do get things out of coaches, you know, both good and bad. 2018, I had another 2nd place finish, another top 3, and I hurt my back. So I called it a season there. After 2017, I never thought that I'd miss the Olympia again. That's just the way things were going. 2018 didn't work out. And that's when I reached out to Barry, and I wasn't happy in 2018 the way things were going. I actually almost quit bodybuilding. It's just coach that I had was just really, really running me down to a point. And, you know, I ended up in the hospital for 2 days at one point after a show, and things weren't going very well. And I didn't know if I wanted to continue to do that. So I reached out to Barry, and I was like, you know, I got back together with him, and he's big on, which I think is very important, the health aspect of bodybuilding, which is another thing to consider when you're hiring a coach, is, you know, somebody that really cares about your health and not just, you know, placings and making sure that they're helping you out with your name. 2019, I did all top tier shows. I was 3rd in 1 show, 5th. I got first call out at Pittsburgh, 6th. Missed the Olympia that year. That year was all points. So you had to place, it was all a tier level. It was all a point thing. I missed out on the Olympia that year. 2020, that was when COVID happened. I was getting ready. I had a bunch of shows lined up. I was looking really good. I was really confident about it. I thought there was no doubt I was missing the Olympia that year. Then COVID happened, and, you know, Barry has been wanting me to get into bodybuilding forever. Like I told you, since he first started coaching me, and he was like, all right, let's do Classic Physique. And I was like, it was a tough decision, because going from a division that you're so successful in and taking the leap to go to Classic, it was a big decision, you know? So I reached out to a buddy of mine who went up, Ricky Moten. He's actually moved up to 212 now, but he was a top Classic guy. And he made the move from Men's Physique to Classic. So I talked to him, and he gave me some advice. I was like, all right, let's do it. So I was 12 weeks out from Tampa, and I had a men's physique doing classic. I was not ready. But I went in and I learned a ton, which was I am so glad I did it just for that reason, because posing and bodybuilding is completely it was like learning a different language for me, from men's physique. So that was just the 12 weeks learning, just focusing on mandatories was hard enough for me, but I learned so much during that time. And then I went to Tampa. I placed 8th at Tampa, which for the physique that, like, for what I was at that point, it actually gave me a lot of confidence knowing that if I can place top 10, 8th at this show, with a men's physique body, that I have the potential to really to be great at this. So that was my last show, August 2020. And the focus has now been just getting bigger and getting the legs to come up, which is happening. I thought I would have been in prep this year, but I had some personal things happen in the past year that kind of put a damper on, getting ready and what it takes to grow, I guess. Not getting into that, but yeah. So here I am now. I think I'm going to take the rest of the year, and then I'm going to hit an early show next year, assuming that everything goes well. So that's the plan. I hope to show up next year with a completely different physique, which after 3 years, I would hope so.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Scott. Now I want to ask you a little bit, because I've had a few men's physique guys on the podcast, not a whole lot, and I don't to be candid, I don't follow it a whole lot myself personally, but if you really listen to like bodybuilding talk, a lot of times, open men's type bodybuilders, they put classic physique down quite a bit. Like I hear it a lot, but I think it's great that there's different categories for different physiques for different people, because not everybody wants to be an open men's bodybuilder, and we all have different physiques, and we want to take we have different goals. We want to take our bodies in different directions. So I think it's cool. I respect it. But maybe just talk to somebody. Maybe they look in the mirror and all they're thinking about is bodybuilding, but maybe they're not ready for bodybuilding, or maybe they don't have a physique for open men's bodybuilding, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, just talk to somebody about maybe like thinking about starting out in men's physique or even class physique. Like, why is that okay?
Yeah. And to be 100% honest, I am not the biggest fan of men's physique myself, even though I've been, at a high level and done it myself. But I'm very, very grateful for the division. I think it's a great place for people to start at. It gave me opportunities. It gave me the chance to become an IFBB pro so early in my bodybuilding career, which obviously would never happen if it wasn't for that division. It's what's given me this platform, which has been great. Just because you want to be a bodybuilder doesn't mean you're ready to be a bodybuilder. People like to talk shit about men's physique, but those guys, if you look at the pros, the top pros, those guys have incredible physiques, and it's a great place. I don't, like you said, I know you don't follow it, but there's some guys like Brandon Hendrickson, Andre Ferguson. If there wasn't a men's physique, where would we get to appreciate such a great physique? Yeah, it's not an open guy. It's different, Same thing with Chris Bumstead. Chris Bumstead, if there wasn't a classic physique, a lot of people think Chris would be a great open bodybuilder. He's 6'2". I don't think he would be a great open bodybuilder. I just think he's too tall. If there wasn't a classic physique, where would we get to appreciate a Chris Bumstead, or a Breon? That's what's great about these divisions, and some people just aren't. Bodybuilding, if you get into men's physique, nothing is different, like your training isn't different. It shouldn't be. Granted, a lot of these guys today, and I never thought I would say this, I think men's physique is going in the totally wrong direction. I think guys are getting way too big, and they're starting to look ridiculous in board shorts. It's starting to become the division where, and there's some great men's physique guys that train their legs and have, a nice decently balanced body, but there's a lot of guys that just are getting massive and they just look ridiculous in board shorts. That being said, it's a great division. It's a great division for someone to get into a prep. A lot of guys, you hear it like online, they're like, oh, I want to do a prep, but I'm not big enough. It's like for a lot of those people online, it's just an excuse as to why they won't prep, when it's like you have two divisions. You have classic physique and men's physique, where you can do it and fit in. You don't have to be as big as you think you have to be. And it gives you an opportunity to do a prep, which is, I think, is most important, to do a prep and see if this is actually something you would even enjoy. Because a lot of people do a prep and they're like, this is terrible, and I never want to do this again.
For sure. Now let's talk about, what do you have something kind of in your mind, Scott, in terms of classic physique and moving forward, in regards to like kind of like a goal or a vision for yourself as a bodybuilder, to where it's like, okay, these are some things that I would like to accomplish before my bodybuilding career is over? If so,
Yeah.
what are some of those things?
Well, I didn't mention why I mean, I know I said that COVID happened. I moved up the classic physique, but I didn't mention the reason why I wanted to move the classic. My heart has been in classic for years. Like when I picture a physique that I want to build, it's not in board shorts, it's in a variation of posing trunks, and it's going to be the classic posing trunk. So when I think about what I want to build, it wasn't in men's physique, and I really, really want to work towards that. But my goal, honestly, when I come back next year, is I want to contend to win shows. I want to have, that's what I was doing in men's physique. I didn't move from men's physique to classic physique to not do well. I was a contender in all the shows that I competed at in men's physique, and I plan on doing that in classic physique too. So my goal is honestly to win the first show that I come back to. That's my goal. And I would like to go back to the Olympia. I want to be the second guy that's won a men's physique show and also a classic physique show. Logan Franklin got that first, but I want to be the second one. I do have big goals in classic. And I mean, I realistically, I'm not thinking that I'm going to be Mr. Olympia. I've gotten to the point now in my life where I'm old enough to realize that that's just not in my cards, and that's totally okay. You don't have to be Mr. Olympia to have a successful career. It would be amazing for me to win a show in classic and go back to the Olympia. And even if I place 16th at the Olympia, that's going to be an amazing accomplishment for me, for anybody. I see people go to the Olympia now. Being the fact that I've been there and I haven't been back since, I realize how amazing that opportunity is. So I see guys going to the Olympia and placing 16th and being upset about it, but it's really such an amazing accomplishment. So my goal is to come back and win a show and go to the Olympia.
Love that, man. Love it. Now, outside of Andrew Barry being kind of like a huge influence in your bodybuilding career, and maybe you've met this person, you've worked with this person, maybe it's just somebody, maybe through YouTube or what have you, but is there somebody else or a couple other people that have had kind of like a big influence on your bodybuilding career, whether that's your training, your mindset, what have you?
In the bodybuilding world, honestly, no. I'm not close with a lot of when I look at somebody, I appreciate somebody for them as a people. Like I love bodybuilding. When I see a physique, I think it's amazing. But what goes further for me is like how people are as people, so it doesn't have to be a bodybuilder to get me to that point. Like I've been very close with Andrew, but my fiance, she's probably the biggest, thing in my life. She trains with me a lot, and she's like a crazy soccer mom at these bodybuilding shows, and she's the same way in the gym. She'd be like, more, she'll be like, I'll be on the hack squat, and she'd be like, no, you're not done, so and she sacrifices so much for me to do this. So it would be unfair to me to say that there's a bodybuilder out there that has helped me mentally, or to be who I am, or to motivate me. But there's really not a lot. I've never really been motivated a lot by athletes. I've been more motivated by people. There's one athlete that I really respect, and that's Tom Brady. Other than that, I don't really get big into these athletes. I think I really like people for people. you know, outside of what they do as sports, but more who they are as like humans that really like motivate and inspire me.
Love that, man. So, just to follow up then, has there been a human being or somebody that has kind of inspired you or challenged you outside of your fiance that that you kind of want to speak about, or is your fiance kind of that number one?
Yeah, she's definitely the number one. Honestly, I'm pretty like when I first got into the fitness industry, I was close with a lot of people, but I'm kind of a loner, you know. I'm kind of a simple guy. I like to stay at home. I mean, the gym is my favorite place to be, but like being at home with my family is really my favorite place to be. So I don't have a lot of people that I'm really close with, but the people that I'm close with, I'm very close with, and I'm very appreciative of, you know, the relationships and whatnot. But yeah, my family is really is everything to me.
Love it, man. That simple life is just perfect for bodybuilding then, right?
It is. Honestly, when COVID happened, I was like, this isn't even different for me. Like when everything was locked down, and obviously I feel terrible for all, you know, everything that happened and how people are affected by it. But I was like, I was in prep too, and I'm like, my life has not changed at all. This is actually, I'm like meant for this life.
Right, for sure, man. I love that. Okay, so we're gonna kind of start wrapping things up. You mentioned you're from the Northeast, but you're currently in Florida. So tell us, if you don't mind, Scott, why did you guys decide to pick up and move down south to Florida?
I mean, the weather, bodybuilding, and I was mentioning to you earlier, we invest in real estate. Boston's getting crazy with like prices and stuff. We came down to Florida during COVID while I was getting ready for Tampa Pro, and we started looking at, you know, the real estate down here. We're like, wow, it's a lot cheaper than what it is up north, you know. So that was, you know, that was the thing that got her to come down here, because her family's from Boston, so it was hard for her to move. Me, I'm not near my family anyway, so I was like, I want to go to Tampa. You know, the weather, bodybuilding is down here, you know. So bodybuilding and our real estate business are really the two big things that brought me down here.
Cool, cool. Now I want to ask you, because you brought up real estate a couple of times, and I myself, you know, am just getting into real estate. I bought a duplex here last year. I'm kind of always on the lookout for a good deal. But
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
yeah, for sure. So tell us, because from my personal perspective, I'm not going to get off on a tangent, but real estate is a great opportunity for, you know, investment now, but investing in the future, right?
Yeah.
Getting that cash flow, passive income, all the things, tax breaks. But from your perspective, you and your fiance, why has real estate kind of been an avenue that you've chosen to go down with your bodybuilding career, your career in the 401k business? Why have you guys chosen or decided to take the route of real estate?
Well, that's all my fiance, Natalia. She's been on real estate ever since we started dating. She's like, we need to buy properties because this is what her dad did, you know, real estate. So we ended up our first investment. We bought a 3-family in Boston. So we did the house hack, you know, we rented out the 2 units and lived in 1 unit for free and got a little cash flow and was able to save money. And that was life changing. People don't realize, I mean, like real estate can really be life changing. And it has been for us. It's opened us up the doors to now we're up to five units now, 5 total rentals that we have, which has been, like I said, it's been life changing. And my goal is that when, you know, people are retiring from bodybuilding, I want to be retiring from everything, you know, when I'm in my early 40s. That's what my goal is.
That's good, man. No, I love that. What do you have, just for somebody listening that maybe doesn't know anything about real estate, do you have like just 1 or 2 kind of like quick pieces of advice when somebody's maybe starting to think about real estate? Or because, you know, just like bodybuilding and coaching, right? And nutrition, like because of social media, because we're living in this information age, there's so much information. One person tells you to buy apartment complexes. One person tells you to buy, you know, single, you know, unit homes and like all the other things. But from your experience, maybe from your fiance's experience, do you have a couple pieces of advice for somebody that's thinking about buying their first piece of real estate?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the best thing that we did to start off was I mean, you hear a lot of people buying duplexes. They live in one and then they rent out the other. That rental covers their mortgage and they're living for free. And then from there, you're just saving money. So I think and depending on where you live, obviously situations are different depending on, what the market is like and what, duplexes are like. But I think like something simple like that, or even buying a single family house. A lot of people do this too. They buy a single family house and they rent out the rooms, and then they have the roommates paying for the mortgage. You have to, uh, sacrifice, whether it be, living with your parents, saving your money to get into real estate, or like I said, having roommates to get into real estate. But sacrifice, and we still are sacrificing. We've moved like from house, we'll buy a house, fix it up. We're moving a year later. So we haven't really been settled in since we really got into this. We've sacrificed a lot, but it's been so worth it, but like, yeah, you just gotta sacrifice, some things to better yourself for the future.
100%, man. All right, Scott. So tell us, kind of just looking back over your bodybuilding career, up to this point. We know you still got a long career ahead of yourself, but what do you feel like bodybuilding has taught you, or what do you feel like bodybuilding has given you up to this point?
First, bodybuilding has given me a purpose that I never had. When I told you I started my job out of college, I liked my job, but I didn't feel like I had a purpose. And then when I found bodybuilding, I started to hate my job, and I found like a purpose, something that I really loved. And bodybuilding, I tell people this all the time: if you can be a bodybuilder and if you can like do it right and prep for a show, it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do in your life. If you can take that mental strength and that hard work and just what it takes to go through bodybuilding, and you decide that bodybuilding isn't for you, or you want to put that energy towards something else, I think what you learn from bodybuilding, you can honestly accomplish just about anything in life, when you take that, that work ethic and that grind and that, all the things that bodybuilding takes to be successful. If you put those towards other things, you can do bodybuilding, you can do a lot of things. I think that's like the big thing that I've taken away from bodybuilding.
100%, man. All right. So last question, and then I'm going to kind of give you the platform to share anything as we wrap up, as we close out here, Scott. Again, kind of just looking back over your bodybuilding career, do you have like a piece of advice or some wisdom just to share with any of us in terms of maybe something that you know now that you kind of wish you knew when you first got into bodybuilding or when you first got into competing? Is there anything kind of in that regard that you'd like to share with us?
Just work hard. One thing that I see, and this isn't in regards to me, but I do coaching as well. And a lot of my guys are like, I kind of get a lot of like the younger early 20s that, guys that are just starting in not just bodybuilding, but kind of in life. And I think with everything that I've learned, at my age, I'm 35 now, I've gone through so much in life, and I try to help those guys in bodybuilding and in life when it comes to money, when it comes to bodybuilding, when it comes to, the relationships. I think one thing that I do see is guys, and not to get on the drug topic, but I see a lot of guys that want to get into drugs like too early. And I'm a big proponent of waiting. I turned pro naturally. And like I said, granted, it was in men's physique. I didn't feel the need to do anything at that time. I didn't touch anything until I turned pro. I think that people nowadays with like Instagram and, all the, instant gratification, people think that, drugs are everything. And I think young kids need to realize that there is so much that they can tap into without drugs, that they need to really do that. If you do all the right things, you can build an amazing physique, and you don't need to get caught up in, being, they see these 21-year-old kids that come to me and they're like, hey, I want to do a cycle. And I'm very grateful that the majority of them have listened to me. I'm like, you're just too young, let's just get you in the habits of doing all the right things. So when you're ready to do that, if you decide that bodybuilding is actually for you, because a lot of people are like, they don't even know if bodybuilding is for them, but they want to start taking drugs. But please just start doing all the right things at an early age and just see how far you can go naturally. and then go from there.
I really appreciate you touching on that, Scott. And then one thing to add to that, I mean, you were in your late 20s when you first started taking drugs, correct? I mean, you didn't start.
Yeah, it wasn't
until
until
27, right?
it wasn't until after I turned pro. So I did my first show at 27. I must have turned pro at 28, and then probably I must have been either 28 or 29 when I first did. And what I did, what I still do to this day, is very, very simple. You know, that's another thing that we won't get into. But yeah, I was 28 or 29 years old for the first time.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate you, Scott, touching on that, because that's something that we don't talk a lot about. You know, the PEDs on this podcast, but when it does come up, you know, it's something that a lot of these pros say is like, man, like I did start really young, and I wish I would have started later, or I started later, and that's what I suggest. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Now, before I kind of do the outro here, Scott, I just want to kind of give you the opportunity to share, you know, any shout outs, any sponsors, anything that you kind of want to share, your own coaching. Where can people connect with you? Where can people find you on Instagram or anywhere else you would like to share or send the listeners?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. It's just Scott Dennis. Very simple, easy to find. I do coaching. You can find, you know, my rates and stuff at scottdennis.com. Yeah, nobody to shout out. I've got no sponsors. You know, I've had them in the past. I've realized that life is good without them. Like I said, you know, going into all the other stuff in life, I've been able to not have to worry about that stuff. But I'm thankful for you. I appreciate you having me on, and it was, you know, it was really good talking to you and meeting you as well.
For sure. And you're very welcome, Scott. I appreciate you, man, being truthful and candid and open and just sharing behind the muscle. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man.
Cool. All right. Those of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much to all of you, whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching or listening through YouTube. Thank you so much. If it wasn't for all of you, the podcast wouldn't exist. Before we close out today's conversation with Scott, I just have a couple of quick favors to ask all of you. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That's really, really important because I release all of these episodes first on YouTube, and then I distribute them to the other podcast platforms. If you're not a YouTube person, or it's easier for you to listen on another podcast platform, we are available on iTunes and all the other major podcast platforms. So all you got to do is search Behind the Muscle podcast and you will find us. The second favor I'd ask of all of you, take this episode, if you're on Instagram, which probably most of you are, take this episode with Scott, share this episode on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Scott and make sure you tag Behind the Muscle so that we know you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.